I have been able to smell people's emotions since I was a child. Sweetness meant love. Bitterness meant grief. And a sharp, spicy sting meant anger and disgust. During my 10 years with Julian, his scent had never changed. It was always a sweet, comforting vanilla, so sweet it could rot your teeth. The only time it changed was the night my sister, Jasmine, moved abroad. When Julian came home late that night, the scent radiating from him was so bitter it made my stomach turn. But back then, I didn't connect the two events. It wasn't until 3 years later, when Jasmine came back to get married. That day, Julian's scent was a suffocating mix of bitterness and a sharp, stinging spice. It was a smell I had never encountered on him before. Frowning, I followed him out of the reception hall. In the quiet stairwell, I heard his voice, low, choked, and dripping with agony. "Enough, Jasmine. Just to make me give up, you'd rather marry a total stranger?" Jasmine sobbed, her voice cracking. "What else was I supposed to do? You're Chloe's fiancé, and Chloe is my sister. We can't keep making this mistake." I froze at the entrance. My entire body trembled with shock. It felt as if my heart was being slowly crushed in a fist, squeezing the air out of my lungs until I couldn't breathe. Right then, my phone buzzed. A calendar notification popped up. Wedding with Julian next week. I stared at the screen for 2 seconds. Then I called the venue and canceled the wedding. 第二集. Through the crack in the door, I saw the two of them wrapped in a painful, desperate embrace. The scent of grief radiating from them was so thick it was almost physical. Jasmine covered her face, her shoulders shaking violently. Julian let it go. "We have to stop." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with unspeakable sorrow. "I'm getting married today. Next week, you're marrying Chloe. Chloe and I only have each other. Since our parents passed away, she's my only family. Don't hurt her, I beg you." I leaned heavily against the cold wall. My chest throbbed with a million tiny needle pricks. The sheer absurdity of the situation made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. I stood there like a lunatic, not knowing what expression to put on my face. Jasmine.
Julian.
I had never once connected them in my mind. For the past few years, they had kept such a polite, distant boundary. They behaved like strangers, and I was the only bridge between them. During holidays, Julian would bring gifts to our house and greet her with polite formality. Jasmine would nod distantly and say nothing more than, "Please, make yourself at home." Every time Julian left, Jasmine would stroke my hair, her emotions tightly suppressed. "Chloe must be happy," she would whisper. Back then, I didn't understand the deep sadness in her eyes. But now I did. Inside the stairwell, Julian shook his head. His hands shook as he desperately tried to grab hers. "Don't do this to me, Jasmine. Please." Jasmine closed her eyes and slapped his hand away. I said, "It's over. Julian, we were just never meant to be." Julian punched the concrete wall. His hand, the hand of a brilliant surgeon, was instantly covered in blood, but his eyes were redder than the blood dripping from his knuckles. "I don't care about fate. Jasmine, let's run away. Let's leave this place together." She tore herself from his grip, her gaze hardening. "I won't hurt Chloe. If you dare do anything, I will never speak to you again." He froze. His spine went rigid, like a bowstring stretched to its absolute limit. Then, with a bitter, defeated laugh, all the strength drained from his body, and his shoulders slumped. "Fine. You win, Jasmine. You win. I will stay with Chloe. For the rest of my life." I closed my eyes, a mocking smile on my lips. It was all a joke. I stumbled away from the stairwell. My steps were hollow, and every drop of color had drained from my face. A short while later, Julian returned to the banquet hall and sat down next to me. "What's wrong, babe?" He gently touched the corner of my reddened eyes, his voice dripping with concern. "Have you been crying?" I looked up, digging my fingernails into my palms. He was back to his usual self, warm, gentle, and perfect. It was as if the scene I had just witnessed was nothing but a hallucination. I instinctively shrank back from his touch. "I'm fine." He didn't press. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, and his attention was immediately drawn to the grand doors at the end of the aisle. "And now, please welcome the beautiful bride." As the host spoke, Jasmine walked down the aisle in her white wedding gown. She looked at me first. When her gaze briefly brushed past Julian, it was filled with a lingering, quiet sorrow. As for Julian, his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. I watched it all play out. Taking a soft breath, a wave of cold desolation washed over me. Because out of the three of us in this room, not a single one smelled sweet. Up on the stage, Jasmine was reciting her vows to her new husband. Soon it was time for the family speeches. The host walked over with the microphone. "Now, we invite the bride's only sister, Chloe, to say a few words of blessing." I reached out to take the mic, But Julian, who had been silent the entire time, suddenly stood up and snatched it first. 第三集. I froze. The host froze. Everyone in the room looked on in confusion. On stage, Jasmine's body went completely rigid. She gave Julian a subtle, pleading shake of her head. Julian kept his eyes lowered, looking down at me with practiced tenderness. Let me do it. I'm afraid if you start speaking, you'll cry too hard, and my heart can't take that. Without waiting for my response, he raised the microphone. His voice echoed through the speakers, flat and devoid of real emotion, like he was delivering a business report. Chloe wants to tell you that you look beautiful today. She hopes you will be happy forever and always stay true to yourself. If you ever feel tired or unhappy out there, you can always come home. We will always be there for you. Jasmine forced a small smile. I know. Thank you. They looked at each other from across the room, then quickly averted their eyes. Only I could smell the suffocating bitterness hanging in the air between them. The speeches ended, and the wedding proceeded smoothly. I turned my head to look at the man sitting beside me, whose mind was clearly miles away. I didn't want to say any of those things, I said quietly. Didn't you hear me practicing my speech at home? And besides, I could have said it myself. Julian snapped out of his daze. Hiding the complex emotions in his eyes, he reached out and playfully pinched my cheek. His smile was doting. The wedding hasn't even started, and your eyes are already puffy from crying. I was just worried you wouldn't make it through a single sentence. He chuckled softly. Chloe has always been so sensitive. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. It was no different from how he used to hold me. If I hadn't smelled that the sweetness in his emotions had completely evaporated, I would have truly believed he loved me. Is that so? The corner of my mouth twitched into a strained smile. Then thank you. He didn't notice the edge in my voice. Jasmine had walked over to our table, raising her champagne glass to toast us. Chloe, you're getting married next week. She gently patted my head. My little sister is all grown up. I kept my eyes down, feeling a sickening wave of nausea rise in my chest, accompanied by a dull, throbbing pain. She turned to Julian. Take good care of my sister. I hope you keep your promise. Julian, who rarely drank, downed his entire glass of champagne in one gulp. I will. They quickly broke eye contact. Jasmine moved to the next table, and laughter rippled through the hall. But Julian kept drinking, one glass after another. I watched him the whole time. I didn't stop him. There was no point anymore. That night, Julian got dead drunk. The moment we got home, he collapsed onto the living room sofa. Jasmine, why couldn't it be us? Tell me why. I sat on the armchair nearby, listening quietly. I sat there and listened to my fiancé call out my sister's name in his drunken slumber. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was the coordinator from the wedding venue. Hi, Chloe. We noticed you canceled the wedding on our portal. Is everything okay? We just wanted to remind you that according to the contract, the deposit is non-refundable. I gave a soft hum. Yes, it's canceled. Keep the deposit. It's fine. After I hung up, Julian muttered, Chloe, my throat hurts. Get me a glass of honey water. I ignored him. I went straight to the bedroom and locked the door. I canceled the catering orders, returned the wedding decorations online, and then booked a one-way ticket to Iceland. I had always wanted to go there. Julian had always claimed he was too busy with hospital shifts. Well, now I could go alone. Lying in bed, sleep eluded me. I began to mentally retrace the steps of our 10-year relationship. The more I looked back, the more I saw the glaring red flags I had previously ignored. Like the time Jasmine moved abroad, and his mood had plummeted for weeks for no apparent reason. Or the year Jasmine graduated, and he insisted on flying across the country with me just to congratulate her. Or the way that, in every single photo of the three of us, his head was always slightly tilted toward Jasmine. I didn't know when it had started, but I knew. It was time for it to end. The next morning, when I woke up, Julian was already in the kitchen making breakfast. He had cooked for me for years, never letting me lift a finger. Morning. He set the plates on the table and asked casually, I drank too much last night. Did I say anything stupid? I stared at the strawberry jam on the table. I hated strawberry jam. Jasmine loved it. No, I replied flatly. He quietly let out a breath, but then frowned slightly. You didn't even put a blanket on me last night, and there was no honey water. I woke up freezing, and my head is splitting. I looked him dead in the eye. I am not obligated to take care of you. He froze. Julian pressed his lips together, swallowing his sudden irritation. A flicker of anxiety crossed his eyes. What's wrong? Did someone upset you? Or are you stressed about the wedding preparations? I didn't answer. I grabbed the toast smeared with strawberry jam and threw it directly into the trash can. I hate strawberries. Looking at his bewildered face, I let out a cold laugh. The one who loves strawberries is Jasmine. 第四集 I walked out of the apartment and wandered aimlessly down the streets. A light drizzle was falling. It wasn't heavy enough to need an umbrella, but it was enough to knock the dead leaves off the trees, letting them rot in the mud. I stopped outside our old high school. Julian and I had been classmates here. Jasmine was a grade above us. Back then, she would always wait for me after school, so we could walk home together. At some point, Julian started walking with us. Jasmine used to tease me, saying Julian was doing it because he had a crush on me and wanted to walk me home. But even though we were in the same class, we barely spoke. Yet, from that day on, my eyes couldn't help but follow him. After the SATs, Jasmine encouraged me to confess my feelings to him. So I did. I remembered the shock on his face when I asked him out, but the rejection that had been on the tip of his tongue was swallowed back down. Instead, he had said, "Okay." And just like that, Julian became a permanent fixture in my and Jasmine's lives. I kept walking, my hair soaked by the rain, my feet growing heavier with every step. I couldn't help but wonder, what if he only agreed to be with me so he could be closer to Jasmine? What if the sweet scent of love I had smelled on him all these years was just a lie he forced himself to project? I didn't dare go down that rabbit hole, thinking like that would drive me insane. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and hailed a cab. Just as I got into the back seat, Julian's black Mercedes sped past us. "Sir, follow that Mercedes," I whispered, my voice hoarse. That direction didn't lead to his hospital, nor did it lead to his parents' house. Where was he going? The answer was screaming in my mind, but my heart clenched, too terrified to believe it. The cab took several turns and finally stopped in front of a small, charming cottage in the quiet suburbs. I never knew he owned a house here. I got out of the cab. As I walked closer, the muffled sound of an argument reached my ears. Jasmine sounded like she was on the verge of a breakdown. What did Chloe mean by that comment this morning? "Julian, you promised me she would never find out. You promised you wouldn't hurt her." Julian's jaw was clenched tight. "She won't find out. She was probably just in a bad mood." I asked her if I said anything stupid last night, and she said no. Only then did Jasmine seem to calm down. She wept softly. "In any case, this is the last time I'm coming here. We cannot contact each other ever again." Julian's voice was a soft, desperate whisper. "Really? Can you really let go of this place? We bought this cottage 5 years ago. We have so many beautiful memories here. Can you really just wipe them away? Jasmine, stop lying to yourself." Then, Jasmine threw herself into his arms, and they held each other tightly. It was so picturesque. It made me look like the cruel villain standing in the way of their true love. I couldn't hear what else they said. A loud buzzing filled my ears. As I leaned against the gate, I noticed the archway of the cottage was covered in climbing jasmines. Every corner of this place was a testament to their love. And I was nothing but a pathetic clown. A flood of memories rushed into my mind. For years ago, on New Year's Eve, both of them claimed they had to work late shifts. I spent the countdown alone. 3 years ago, on Valentine's Day, both of them said they had business trips. The romantic dinner I prepared ended up in the trash. 2 years ago, on Jasmine's birthday while she was still abroad, Julian suddenly told me he had to fly out for an emergency surgery. That same night, Jasmine's phone went unanswered. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. The truth wrapped around my throat like a poisonous vine, cutting off my air. I went home. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I quietly packed my bags. When Julian came home later, his scent was miserable, but the moment he saw me, he forced a bright smile. He pulled me into a tight embrace. There wasn't a single trace of sweetness on him. "Chloe, I'm so sorry about the strawberry jam this morning. My brain was still foggy from last night. Are you mad at me?" I stared at him, then let my lips curve into a wide, cheerful smile. "Of course not." He let out a sigh of relief and headed into the bathroom. My smile instantly vanished, replaced by cold indifference. 第5集. 3 days after her wedding, Jasmine brought her new husband, Luke, to visit. She took my hand, her smile warm and sisterly. "Chloe is getting married. I can't be your maid of honor next week, but being able to hand you over to Julian is enough for me." I looked down at our joined hands. "Is that so? You don't feel any regret?" She stiffened for a fraction of a second, then laughed it off. "Why would I regret seeing you happy, Emmacham?" I murmured, pulling my hand back. She didn't notice my coldness. "I'm going to see what delicious food Julian is whipping up," she said cheerfully, heading into the kitchen. The table was set with an incredibly lavish feast. Julian was supposed to have a surgery scheduled for today. He was the kind of doctor who put his patients above everything else. But this morning, I heard him call his chief to swap shifts. All so he could cook a meal for Jasmine. At the dinner table, the two of them sat diagonally from each other. The maximum distance possible. "Chloe mentioned you like seafood, Jasmine, so I made a seafood feast today. But don't eat too much cold seafood. It's not good for your stomach." Julian said casually. I listened in silence. Every detail he knew about Jasmine's preferences felt like a slap in my face, because I had never told him those things. Jasmine gave a cold, polite nod, then turned to cut a piece of steak for Luke. Julian's scent turned bitter and dejected. I watched it all, feeling completely numb. Except for Luke, who was happily eating, everyone at the table was drowning in their own thoughts. In the afternoon, Luke had to head back to work. Jasmine and Julian accompanied me to my final wedding dress fitting. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the glittering gown. I was dazed. This dress was designed by Julian himself. It was intricately embroidered with delicate white petals. I remembered the day he had proudly shown me the sketches like a boy presenting a treasure. Chloe, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, he had said, eyes shining. Even when we're old and gray, I want to hold your hand and look at the beautiful things we built together. I never could have imagined that in just 6 months, the truth would be laid bare. I lost my parents at 8, and now, at 23, I was losing my sister and my fiancé. I wondered if I was cursed. Why was I destined to lose everything? Why could I never keep the people I loved? The boutique assistant smiled warmly as she adjusted the train of the gown. This gown is called Pure Jasmine, Chloe. I'm guessing your sister's name inspired it. My body went completely rigid. So that was the name of the dress. Those embroidered petals weren't cherry blossoms. They were jasmines. A wave of pure disgust and absurdity washed over me. I ripped the veil off my head. The assistant gasped, startled. Chloe, is there something wrong with the dress? I stared at the crumpled veil on the floor, my voice hollow. No. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. I changed out of the dress and walked out of the fitting room. Jasmine and Julian were standing far apart, looking like polite strangers. Julian blinked in surprise. Babe, why didn't you show us? I wanted to see you in it. I forced a smile. If you see it now, where's the surprise on the wedding day? Julian smiled tenderly, and Jasmine patted my head affectionately. It made my skin crawl. According to tradition, the bride and groom shouldn't see each other the night before the wedding. So, Julian checked into a hotel. Before he left, he held me tightly, his heart hammering against his chest. Tomorrow, you'll finally be my wife, Chloe. I'm so happy. I nodded expressionlessly. At midnight, I packed the last of my things and headed to the airport. My flight was scheduled for 2 a.m. Before boarding, I took a photo of the suburban cottage and sent it to our 3-person Snapchat group. I didn't say a single word. I turned off my phone, stepped onto the plane, and left. 12 hours later, the plane touched down in Iceland. By then, the wedding was already over. The moment I turned my phone back on, a barrage of missed calls and notifications flooded in, making my phone vibrate violently. 114 missed calls, 87 text messages, 29 voicemails. Most of them were from Julian. A few dozen were from Jasmine. There were even a handful from Luke, Jasmine's new husband, and several from the wedding coordinator, whose confusion must have mutated into sheer panic when the groom and the guests arrived at a locked, empty venue. I unlocked the phone. The 3-person group chat on Snapchat, the one where I had sent the photo of the suburban cottage with the climbing jasmines, sat at the top of my inbox. Both Julian and Jasmine had opened it. Neither of them had replied in the group. Instead, my personal chat with Julian was a wall of frantic, escalating messages. Julian, 9:14 a.m. Chloe, where are you? The makeup artists are at the hotel. They said you aren't in your room. Julian, 9:45 a.m. Your phone is going straight to voicemail. Are you okay? Did something happen on the way? Julian, 10:30 a.m. Chloe, please answer me. People are starting to arrive. The venue coordinators are saying the booking was canceled days ago. They think it's a system glitch. Tell me where you are. Julian, 11:15 a.m. What is that picture you sent? Why do you have a picture of that house? Julian, 12 p.m. Chloe, please, talk to me. Julian, 1:30 p.m. Jasmine is crying. She won't tell me what's going on, but she looks terrified. Did you do this? Why? The messages ended there, replaced by a series of missed calls spaced exactly 3 minutes apart, ending only when my flight entered airspace, without cellular reception. I leaned my head back against the cold wall of the terminal. I didn't cry. My chest felt hollowed out, like an old tree trunk carved empty by years of quiet rot. For 10 years, I had lived in a cocoon of sweet vanilla, believing I was the luckiest woman alive. I had trusted my nose more than my eyes. I had believed that because Julian smelled of comfort and safety, he was safe. What a foolish, arrogant child I had been. I had forgotten that vanilla is not just a flavor. It is a mask. It is a heavy, synthetic scent used to cover up the smell of mold, decay, and old, damp dust. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was an incoming call from Jasmine. I stared at her name on the screen. Jasmine, my older sister. The girl who had held my hand when our parents' car went over the bridge, who had whispered that we only had each other now. The sister who had looked at me with such fierce, protective love while secretly harboring a quiet, desperate hunger for the man I loved. I swiped the screen. I put the phone to my ear. Chloe? Her voice was raw, hoarse from hours of weeping. Through the line, I couldn't smell her. But I had spent enough years with her to picture the scent that must be radiating from her skin right now. That bitter, oily smell of grief, mixed with the sharp, metallic sting of exposure. I'm here, I said quietly. A sharp intake of breath echoed on the other side. Oh my God. Chloe, where are you? Where did you go? We've been looking everywhere for you. The police. Julian wanted to call the police, but I saw the photo. I know you saw it, I said. My voice was incredibly flat, even to my own ears. It's a beautiful house, Jasmine. The jasmines on the archway are a lovely touch. Did Julian plant them for you? Silence fell over the line. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that stretched on for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then a ragged sob broke through. Chloe, please. It's not what you think. I swear to you, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I asked, staring at a family of tourists loading their suitcases onto a cart. Explain it to me, Jasmine. Explain the 5 years of memories in that cottage. Explain the New Year's Eves where you both worked late. Explain why my wedding dress was named after you. We never wanted to hurt you, she sobbed, her voice cracking under the weight of her own guilt. We tried to stop. We did stop. Years ago, we realized how wrong it was. That's why I moved abroad, Chloe. I ran away because I couldn't bear to look at you, knowing what was in my heart. I wanted you to be happy. Julian wanted to make you happy. He really did. He wanted to stay with me because he couldn't have you. I corrected her, my voice dropping an octave. He used me as a placeholder, a safe, quiet little sister who would keep him close to you. And you let him. Chloe, no. Did you love Luke? I asked, genuinely curious. When you stood on that stage 3 days ago and promised to spend the rest of your life with him, did you smell sweet, Jasmine? Or did you smell like a decaying corpse, just like Julian did? She let out a choked gasp. What? What are you talking about? Nothing, I said, rubbing my temples. It doesn't matter. Tell Julian the wedding is off. Tell him to keep the dress. He can give it to you. After all, it already has your name on it. Chloe, wait. Don't hang up. Where are you? Just tell me you're safe. I pressed the red button. I blocked her number. Then, I went into my settings and blocked Julian's number, his social media accounts, and his email. I did the same for Jasmine. I took a deep, shivering breath. The air of Iceland filled my lungs, cold and sharp. It didn't taste like betrayal. It didn't smell like vanilla or bitterness. It just smelled like ice. And for now, that was enough. I rented a small, 4-wheel drive SUV and drove away from the airport. I didn't have a plan. I had booked a small cabin near the town of Vik, on the southern coast of the island. I wanted to see the Black Sands. I wanted to see a place where the earth itself had been burned to ash and yet remained standing, beautiful in its desolation. The drive was mesmerizing. The landscape of Iceland looked like the surface of another planet, endless fields of black lava rock covered in thick, spongy green moss. The sky was a low, heavy gray, weeping a constant, fine drizzle that clung to the windshield. As I drove, my mind kept drifting back, pulling apart the threads of the last 10 years. I remembered the smell of Julian when we first started dating in high school. I was 16, fragile and terrified of the world after our parents' death. Julian had been the quiet boy in the back of the classroom. When I finally confessed my feelings to him, egged on by Jasmine, and he said yes, his scent had changed. It hadn't been the sickeningly sweet vanilla back then. It had been a light, clean citrus scent, with just a hint of warmth. I had thought it was the smell of young, cautious love. Now I realized it was the smell of relief. He had found a way to stay in Jasmine's orbit. He had found a ticket into our family. How many times had I sat between them on the couch, watching a movie, feeling incredibly cozy because Julian's vanilla scent filled the room. I had always thought that sweetness was directed at me. But Julian's arm had been draped over the back of the sofa, his fingers mere inches from Jasmine's shoulder. The sweetness hadn't been for the girl in his lap. It had been for the girl sitting just out of reach. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. The sheer weight of the realization made my stomach pitch. I opened the door and stumbled out into the damp, freezing air, dry heaving into the moss. There was no one around. The highway was empty, stretching out like a black ribbon into the gray mist. I leaned against the hood of the car, my breath coming in ragged, white plumes. Why didn't I see it? I asked myself, clutching my chest. Why was I so blind? Because I wanted to believe. I wanted so desperately to be loved. After our parents died, Jasmine had been my anchor and Julian had been my harbor. I had built my entire identity around being Julian's fiancée and Jasmine's sister. To question them would have been to question the very foundation of my survival. I looked down in my hands. They were red from the cold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my engagement ring. It was a beautiful, custom-made platinum band with a pear-cut diamond. Julian had told me the shape reminded him of a tear of joy, he had claimed, for the day he met me. I looked at the diamond. In the gray, flat light of Iceland, it didn't sparkle. It looked like a shard of ice. Without another thought, I tossed the ring into the black lava field. It vanished instantly among the moss and the stones. I got back into the car, turned up the heater, and drove on. 2 days passed in quiet isolation. The cabin was a tiny, wooden structure tucked against the side of a towering green cliff. A waterfall cascaded down the rock face just a few hundred yards away, its constant, roaring thunder a soothing white noise that drowned out the frantic thoughts in my head. I spent my days walking along the black sand beach of Rianistra. The waves here were violent, massive walls of dark water that crashed against the shore with terrifying force. The locals called them sneaker waves, silent, unpredictable currents that could sweep a person off the beach and into the freezing ocean in a matter of seconds. I stood at the edge of the wet sand, watching the foam retreat. I felt a strange kinship with this beach. It was a place of warning, a place where beauty was inextricably linked with danger. On the third evening, I turned on my laptop. I had avoided checking the internet, but a lingering, stubborn part of me needed to know what had happened after I left. I logged into my email. There was a message from Luke. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I opened it. "Chloe, I don't know where you are, but I hope you are safe. I'm writing this because I don't know who else to turn to. Jasmine is a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying since the day of your wedding. She won't eat, and she won't look at me. After you sent that photo, she broke down. She confessed everything to me. She told me about the cottage. She told me about her and Julian. She claims it ended years ago, but she admitted they bought that place together while she was still living here, and that they met there secretly even after she moved back. I've packed my things. I'm staying at a hotel. I don't think our marriage can survive this. I don't think it ever should have started. I was a shield for her, wasn't I? A way to prove to herself, and to you, that she didn't want him. I'm not angry at you, Chloe. You deserve to know. But I am deeply, deeply sorry. If you need anything, please let me know. Luke." I stared at the screen. A strange, cold sensation settled in my chest. So, Jasmine's perfect life had shattered, too. The marriage she had rushed into, the one she had used to convince herself and the world that she was letting Julian go, had collapsed in a single day. I felt no satisfaction in this. No sense of triumph. Only a profound, heavy sadness. Jasmine had ruined her own life, Luke's life, and my life, all to protect a lie. All to keep up the appearance of the perfect, self-sacrificing older sister. Then I saw another email. This one was from Julian. The subject line was simply, "I'm coming." My heart skipped a beat. "Chloe, I know you're in Iceland. I found your flight confirmation in our shared browser history on the home computer. You booked a one-way ticket to Reykjavik. I don't care how long it takes or where you're hiding. I'm going to find you. You can't just throw away 10 years of our lives over a misunderstanding. You have to let me explain. I love you, Chloe. I have always loved you. Please don't do this to us. I'm boarding a flight tonight. I'll see you soon. Julian." I closed the laptop with a sharp snap. My breath caught in my throat. He was coming here. He was coming to find me. Even now, when the truth was laid bare, when his lies had been exposed to everyone we knew. Why? Why would he drag himself across the world for a woman he didn't truly love? Because of his ego. Because Julian was a man who needed to be perfect. He was a brilliant surgeon, a doting fiancé, a beloved friend. He couldn't accept a narrative where he was the villain. He needed to explain it, to twist the truth until it fit back into the neat, comfortable box he had built for us. He wanted his vanilla scent back. But I was no longer the girl who swallowed the sweetness to keep from tasting the rot. The next day, the weather took a turn for the worse. A violent storm rolled in from the North Atlantic, bringing howling winds and heavy, blinding sheets of rain. The waterfall behind my cabin turned into a brown, raging torrent, and the windows rattled in their frames. I stayed inside, curled up in a blanket with a cup of black tea. The hours dragged by. Every time the wind shook the cabin, my heart hammered against my ribs. I kept looking out the window, half expecting to see Julian's black rental car pull into the gravel driveway. He didn't know the exact cabin I had rented, but Vic was a small town. There were only so many ghost houses and cabins in the area. If he was determined enough, it wouldn't take him long to find me. At around 4 p.m., a knock sounded at the door. I froze. The tea in my mug sloshed over the rim, burning my fingers. I set the mug down on the wooden table, my breath shallow and rapid. The knock came again, louder this time, competing with the roar of the wind. I walked slowly to the door. My hand hovered over the lock. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice trembling. Chloe. It was his voice. Even through the thick wood and the howling storm, I recognized the smooth, calm cadence of Julian's voice. But there was a tremor in it now, a desperate, ragged edge that I had never heard before. My hand shook as I turned the deadbolt. I opened the door. The cold wind swept into the cabin, carrying with it a spray of freezing rain and a scent so violent, so overwhelming, that I had to take a step back, my hand flying to my nose. It was Julian. He stood on the porch, his dark hair soaked and plastered to his forehead. He was wearing a heavy winter jacket, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. But it was his scent that made me gasp. The sweet vanilla was completely gone. In its place was a suffocating, putrid wave of bitterness, so thick it smelled like charred bones and stagnant water. Beneath the bitterness, there was a sharp, stinging spice, not the clean, fiery heat of a pepper, but a foul, chemical burn, like acid eating through metal. Anger, guilt, despair. It radiated from him in waves, so potent that I could almost see it clinging to him like a dark, greasy fog. Chloe, he whispered, stepping into the cabin without waiting for an invitation. He shut the door behind him, cutting off the howling wind, but trapping his horrific scent inside the small room with us. Get out, I said, my voice barely whisper thin. I backed away from him until my spine pressed against the edge of the kitchen counter. Please, just hear me out, he said, taking a step toward me. His eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, hollow shadows. He looked as if he hadn't slept in days. He reached his hands out, his fingers trembling. I've been driving for hours. I went to every hotel, every guest house in this godforsaken town. Chloe, you can't do this. You can't just run away. I didn't run away, I said, forcing myself to look him directly in the eyes. I left. There is a difference. Because of a stupid mistake, he cried, his voice cracking. He ran a hand through his wet hair, his face twisting in agony. What you heard in the stairwell, what you saw in that photo, it's not what it looks like. Jasmine and we were young, Chloe. Before I started dating you, I had feelings for her. I confessed to her, but she rejected me. She told me she only saw me as a friend. He took another step closer. The smell of his guilt was so strong my eyes began to water. I was hurt, he continued, his words rushing out in a desperate torrent. But then, I started spending more time with you. I realized how sweet you were, how much you needed someone. I fell in love with you, Chloe. I swear to you I did. And the cottage? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. The cottage you bought 5 years ago? The beautiful memories you built there? Were those with me, Julian? He froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice rising. Don't you dare stand there and lie to me anymore. I can smell it on you, Julian. I've been able to smell your lies for 10 years. I just didn't want to believe my own nose. Chloe, you bought that house for her. You met her there while she was supposed to be abroad. You flew across the country to see her graduate. You designed my wedding dress, the dress I was supposed to wear to become your wife, and you named it Pure Jasmine. You covered it in her favorite flowers. I felt a hot tear slip down my cheek, but my voice remained steady, fueled by a cold, hard anger. You didn't love me, Julian. You loved the fact that I looked like her. You loved the fact that by keeping me close, you could always have a piece of her. I was your consolation prize. I was the shadow of the woman you actually wanted. That's not true. Julian roared, his hands clenching into fists. The sharp, stinging spice in his scent flared, hitting my nostrils like a wave of pure bleach. He was angry now. Angry that his perfect image was shattered. Angry that he couldn't manipulate the narrative anymore. I gave you 10 years of my life, he shouted, taking an aggressive step forward. I took care of you. When your parents died, who was there for you? Who held you when you had panic attacks? Who cooked for you, drove you everywhere, protected you? It was me, Chloe. I built a life for us. You think you can just throw that away because of some stupid, unspoken feelings? Unspoken. I let out a mocking, breathless laugh. You asked her to run away with you, Julian. I heard you. In the stairwell, at her wedding, you begged her to leave her husband and run away with you. Julian's face went completely pale. The anger in his scent suddenly collapsed, replaced by a fresh wave of that heavy, rotting bitterness. His shoulders slumped. She wouldn't do it, he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. She chose you, Chloe. She always chose you. No matter how much I begged, no matter what I did, she refused to hurt you. She got married to Luke just to prove to me that we could never happen. Don't you see? We both sacrificed everything to keep you happy. Sacrificed? I stared at him, feeling a deep, profound wave of disgust. You didn't sacrifice anything for me. You lied to me. You kept me in a golden cage built on a foundation of betrayal. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone I know. And you call that a sacrifice? I pointed a trembling finger at the door. Get out of my cabin, Julian. Go back to the city. Go to Jasmine. She's alone now. Her husband left her because of your little secret. You two can finally be together. You don't have to hide anymore. Julian stared at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, animal-like panic. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No. Jasmine won't look at me. She hates me now. She blames me for everything. If I lose you too, Chloe, I have nothing. I have no one. He fell to his knees on the wooden floor, reaching out to grab the hem of my jeans. Please, Chloe, don't do this. I'll do anything. We can stay here in Iceland. We can start over. No one has to know. Just don't leave me. I looked down at him. The man who had been my protector, my rock, my perfect fiancé. He was kneeling on the floor, weeping, smelling like a pile of rotting wood and bitter ash. The vanilla was gone forever. The illusion was shattered, and no matter how much he begged, it could never be put back together. I felt a sudden, strange sense of clarity. For years, I had feared the world without him. I had feared the emptiness of being alone, the quiet house, the absence of his comforting scent. But looking at him now, I realized that the empty world was not scary. It was clean. I don't love you anymore, Julian, I said softly. He froze, his head snapping up to look at me. And the truth is, I continued, I don't think I ever loved the real you. I loved the smell of vanilla, but that wasn't you. That was just a mask. I reached down, gently but firmly pried his fingers off my jeans, and took a step back. Get out. Julian left. He didn't yell anymore. He didn't beg. When he realized that his words could no longer reach me, the fight drained out of him. He stood up, his eyes empty, and walked out into the storm. I watched through the window as his rental car backed out of the driveway and disappeared into the gray, rain-swept highway. I stood in the center of the cabin for a long time, listening to the rain beat against the roof. The smell of his bitterness and anger lingered in the room, heavy and oppressive. I opened all the windows, letting the freezing, wet wind howl through the space. The cold air rushed in, tearing at the curtains, but it washed away the putrid scent of his lies. I stood in the draft, letting my skin grow numb, until the air in the cabin was as clean and cold as the glacier water outside. The next morning, the storm had passed. The sky was a pale, clear blue, and the sun rose over the horizon, casting a weak, golden light across the green cliffs and the black sand. I packed my bags. I checked out of the cabin. I didn't go back to the airport. Instead, I drove east along the ring road, deeper into the heart of the country. I drove past towering glaciers that sparkled like diamonds under the morning sun. I drove past vast fields of black ash, where volcanoes had once torn the earth apart, only for life to slowly, stubbornly find its way back through the moss. I stopped at a small seaside village called Hofen. I booked a room in a small, family-run guest house near the harbor. The owners were an elderly Icelandic couple. When the woman handed me my keys, I caught a faint scent radiating from her. It wasn't vanilla. It wasn't citrus. It was a quiet, warm scent, like toasted oats and fresh wool. It was a simple, honest smell of hospitality, with no hidden layers, no complex webs of deceit.
You smiled ahead.
Thank you, I said. Enjoy your stay, dear, she replied, her eyes crinkling at the corners. That evening, I walked down to the harbor. The air was crisp, smelling of salt, seaweed, and the cold northern wind. I took out my phone. I opened the contact list. I scrolled down to Jasmine's name, which I had unblocked just for this moment. I sent her a single text message. Chloe, I'm staying in Iceland. Don't look for me. I'm going to build a life here. I hope you and Julian find a way to live with what you've done. But do not ever contact me again. We are no longer sisters. I didn't wait for a reply. I took the SIM card out of the phone, walked to the edge of the wooden pier, and dropped the tiny piece of plastic into the dark, swirling water below. It sank instantly, vanishing into the cold depths of the ocean. I leaned against the wooden railing, looking out at the horizon where the dark blue of the sea met the pale pink of the twilight sky. My chest no longer felt hollow. The pain was still there, a dull, aching bruise that would take a long time to heal. But beneath the pain, there was a quiet, solid strength. I had spent my entire life relying on other people's sense to guide me, trying to find safety in their emotions while ignoring my own. But now, as the cold wind whipped my hair across my face, I realized something important. I didn't need to smell other people's love to know I was alive. I closed my eyes and took a deep, slow breath. The air was empty of sweetness. It was empty of bitterness. It was just the wind, the salt, and the sea. And for the first time in my life, it was beautiful.